Next speaker is Dr. Chau from Australian National University, and he's going to present the work on privacy-preserving energy storage sharing with blockchain. And also wanted to inform the audience that this paper has been nominated for the Best Paper Award. So over to you, Dr. Sid.
Okay, thank you very much. You can see my slide, right? Okay, let's begin. So welcome to my talk. We are from ANU. My name is Chau. So this is a joint work with my student Wang and Zhou. I'm going to present our paper on privacy-preserving energy storage sharing with blockchain. So before I introduce all the main idea, maybe I would better try to give you an overview in a few slides, such that you have an idea what's going to be in this talk. I mean, all the main idea being summarized in the title. So the first part is energy storage sharing. So in a nutshell, that means that we are considering, like, for example, in this case, multiple persons sharing a battery and from the grid, so such that they can share the cost. And then the next component is actually privacy preserving. The interesting thing about this is when you share a battery with multiple persons, that means that do you need to also give away all your private information like your demand and etc. to the shared battery in order to use this one? But the answer actually I want to show you actually is no, you don't actually need to do that. So it'll be nice actually you can share the battery and use that effectively and to reduce your cost at the same time that your battery have no idea actually like how much energy you're using. At the same time that everybody would not have the information from other users as well. So that's the idea for privacy preserving energy storage sharing. It turns out to be actually pretty interesting and very challenging problem. So the nice thing about this paper, we also use some of the very interesting latest technology in blockchain. We think the blockchain is actually a perfect system to implement an application like this, because blockchain is a decentralized and very transparent platform to support all kinds of decentralized applications. Okay, so now let's go into the detail of my talk. So first, I want to give actually more detail about energy sharing. I want to define what do you mean by energy sharing. I mean, very easy. You can see that according to the current price of a battery, it's actually very expensive to own a private battery. That means that it's actually much more efficient to share a battery with multiple persons. There are actually a different way to share battery. One easy way to share battery is so-called this community battery. That means that in your neighborhood, so all the co-located users will actually build a common share facility and they can share the first share battery facility all together. That's a community battery. Another way to share energy storage is actually using the cloud energy storage. The nice thing idea is that you can see that the energy provider doesn't need to be co-located with all the users. They can be anywhere, can be remote, but they can, through the grid, they can share the battery remotely. So this actually called cloud energy storage. It's something similar to cloud computing, but in the energy storage sharing setting. And the other possibility is actually this, the peer-to-peer energy storage sharing. I mean, it would be also nice that if individual users have their own private battery and then they pool them together in a decentralized peer-to-peer system such that they can share each other's battery and optimize efficiency of each other. So that would be also an interesting application to do as well. And we kind of want to design some kind of the system that support like a different way to share energy storage. The one key concept for the energy storage sharing is actually called this a virtual net metering. It's actually related to how you possibly split the cost between different users when they use the same energy storage system. And in this example, as you can see that there are multiple users actually using the battery. Each one have different demand, but some demand can come from the battery, some demand can support from the grid. And this is the shared battery. They will execute the charging and discharging schedule accordingly. So because each one has shared differently, then how to actually transfer the credit between each other? In real system, actually the so-called virtual net metering is actually a bill crediting system in the grid operator. It's very easy. Basically, you have your credit or a debit from one energy account and just transfer to another account, basically doing the accounting thing. So this long model will look like this. So for example, you want to pay the grid for $5 at the same time that you expect the battery when they discharge to have some credit, and they will transfer to each of the users as a refund. And that can be settled in an account system in a grid operator. So this actually is done very easily. And so with all this information, now we actually start to ask an interesting question. That is the privacy preserving energy storage sharing. So normally when you share a battery, so you likely share a battery, for example, you want to use the battery to store some of the cheap or peak price or energy, and such that later on you can reuse later. In order to do that, each one need to reserve and tell this battery operator to reserve before that. In this sense, I mean that you need to reveal your private information to your grid operator, to the battery storage operator. But what we want is that we want to have a totally privacy guarantee, such because it will be actually better you protect your privacy. Otherwise, that maybe your consumption behavior will maybe leak unknowing to another third party to know your behavior as well. So in order to do that, we actually need to provide at least a couple of the guarantee of privacy. That's why I'll define the privacy preserving energy storage sharing. First, when you share your battery with the operator, you can use the operator service, but the operator does not know individual user demand. So this is one thing we want to guarantee. Is it possible doing this? The second one is obviously other users also involved as well. So we want to protect the privacy of individual user from the other user, such that the other user will not able to see other users' demand as well. But you will know about how much you pay to the operator and how much service you use, and that's it. But at the end, we also want to make sure that everything is auditable and verifiable by the grid operator. So even there's a arrangement between the batteries and the user, at the end, everything should be auditable, because ultimately the grid operator will be executing the virtual net metering as well. Everything should also be auditable from the grid operator. And at last, we want to achieve is that all the process should be only without any involvement any other third party doing this, including all the scheduling and cost sharing arrangement. We want to able to provide all this guarantee to energy storage sharing. That's why we define this called privacy preserving energy storage sharing. So, but the difficulty is how, because the one difficulty is actually with respect to the dishonest user. So when you hide some of the demand from the battery operator and also from other user, how do we ensure the whole process can still be executed correctly? They will pay accordingly and also claim the refund from the virtual net metering correctly, and also try to also scheduling the battery efficiently. So it could be actually very challenging. So we want on one hand to protect privacy. On the other hand, we want to ensure that everything's been done correctly and there's nobody cheating in the whole process. So how we achieve this one? So eventually we actually use the blockchain technology. So I'm not going to do too much about blockchain technology, what they're using, because it only gives you a very high level idea. Hopefully you can understand the idea. But all the detail remind you actually can be found in our paper, including all the mathematics. So here I don't give you any mathematics. Hopefully you enjoy my talk without any border mathematics. So in a nutshell, our contribution is literally involve a whole bunch of cryptography technology, including zero-knowledge proof, secure multi-party computation, and also smart contract. Don't worry about that, because I'm going to give you some idea in the next couple of slides. And more importantly, the contribution of work is that we actually also prove that our whole system can be theoretically robust against a dishonest majority user. That means that more than one user can be dishonest. And also, more importantly, actually implement the real blockchain Ethereum platform using the Solidity smart contract with some empirical evaluation I can show you at the end of the slide. So in order to appreciate our result, I may give you a very, very brief idea about blockchain and etc., because I think this is not a conference about blockchain, so we do not have the right knowledge about understand blockchain. So very high level, blockchain from Bitcoin is actually decentralized. The first generation blockchain is the decentralized ledger for anonymous transactions. But this is not the main story. The main story is that we have a lot of different blockchain. The one blockchain I'm using actually Ethereum is the second largest one. It supports smart contracts. And the most important thing is that none of the Bitcoin Ethereum actually support any privacy. So there are other systems supporting privacy. We actually using very similar idea in other blockchain systems in order to implement our energy preserving, energy storage sharing applications. And you ask me what exactly is smart contract? So smart contract is a decentralized program associated with each blockchain transactions. So that means that other than just transaction money from one account to another account, you can trigger extra computation. For example, you can do some checking, validation, and financial processing. So you can also use that to implement a whole bunch of financial applications. But the one thing to pay attention is that all this computation associated with smart contract is not free. You have to pay extra gas costs. And according to the current gas price, actually is quite expensive. So you need to minimize the number of computation you need to execute a smart contract. That's why the one thing we can do is maybe we should not execute all the computation on chain. We should do something off chain, but to implement the verification part on chain, such that make sure that all the off chain computation can be done consistently, including the balance transactions. So for the blockchain inside, okay, you may ask what big deal about blockchain privacy? So is it blockchain already anonymized? Why do we need to care about this? But the bad news actually, blockchain privacy is very weak in the current technology because basically it's basically zero privacy protections. All the blockchain is entirely disclosed on the ledger, visible to everybody all the time. Your transaction is actually tracked by all the user, FBI, etc. So also there are a lot of techniques using de-anonymization to track user and track transaction very easily. So that's completely no privacy preserving at all and blockchain. So the good thing is that we can actually use some very nice cryptographic technology. So I'm not going to give you a lot of detail because I'm running out of time. I just basically summarize what I'm doing. So the first technology we're using is the cryptographic commitment. That means that you actually hide the information by cryptography, but you still allow certain homomorphic computation. For example, you're allowed to check something. Using that, we can able to implement this zero-knowledge proof. The good thing about zero-knowledge proof is that you can check some property about your cryptographic encrypted value without actually looking at the value. For example, you can check whether encrypted value is larger than 0 and not, but you cannot see what the value of A. And at last, we actually use the secure multi-party computation for off-chain computation. We also incorporate this with the zero-knowledge proof. I'm not going to team too much detail about all this cryptographic technology because you're going to take another course, to understand the thing, but also you might better read my paper. But here I want to give you a very basic idea how they all come together work in our framework. First, we actually store all the commitment, all the transaction data on blockchain using the cryptographic commitment such that everything's encrypted in the blockchain. That's good. That means that even the blockchain is public, the private data is somehow encrypted, nobody can see it. But the bad news is that because it's encrypted, how do I ensure that all the transactions can be carried out consistently? That's why we need a zero-knowledge proof. The nice thing is that you actually need, for every transaction, you need to create certain zero-knowledge proof to prove that the transaction is consistent. For example, when you transfer money from one account to another account, you cannot create and destroy any money. So this is something to be consistent, to be checked. The good thing about it is that you can implement the checking part in the smart contract to ensure that everything is being executed correctly. At the same time, on a completely encrypted blockchain data. So at last, we just use this secure multi-party computation. We use one very good secure multi-party computation called speed. It ensures that you can be robust against dishonest user. And then we can use that for all the off-chain computation, for example, scheduling, call sharing, and etc. So, and then later on, we upload the zero-knowledge proof for our off-chain computation to the blockchain and then allow third-party auditing. And then also enable, also, for example, the third-party auditing, the virtual net metering as well. Okay, good. So I want to give you a very high level how this thing all come together works. But I cannot give you all technical details. So just very high level, keep it high level as well. So as I mentioned, we use multi-party computation for the scheduling, and then we use zero-knowledge proof to prove that the computation done off-chain is correct, and also make sure that all the payment between the energy provider and the user have been done correctly by zero-knowledge proof. They're basically involve like 5 stages. So I can just go to these 5 stages in very high level. Hopefully you understand the big idea, and then you read the paper, then you can understand all the technical detail about this as well. The first step is actually try to compute what will be the aggregate demand. So note that every user have their own private demand. So we kind of want to compute the aggregate demand. So we can use speed. Speed allow you to secretly share some demand without seeing the demand. By the secure multi-party computation, we're able to compute the aggregate demand. At the same time, nobody user can see other users' demand. So that's good. Then we can use this as the next step for the energy storage scheduling. Note that by privacy-preserving computation about aggregate demand, we can basically schedule. Once you know aggregate demand, you basically also can schedule the battery schedule with respect to aggregate demand, with respect to individual, with respect to the battery capacity as well. So once you've done that, then you can come up with a very efficient scheduling for your energy storage. The good thing is that this also can be done by speed, such that speed can ensure that the computation about your schedule through speed will against any cheating. So that means that any user involved here will not able to cheat it as well. Okay, so once you have the schedule, then you can the next step try to divide the cost. I mean, each user may have some of the demand. Some of them come from the grid, some of them from battery. The good thing is that you can actually have some fair sharing cost sharing scheme, such that each user can have a fair share of his energy from the battery. At the same time, can be ensure that all the costs can be covered by all the users fairly. This also can be done by our secure multi-party computations. Once you have done that, then you know actually how much you need to pay to the grid and how much you need to pay for the battery. So these also possibly be computed by the speed as well, but this only can know by individual user. And the next thing is that once you know the payment for the battery, then they can jointly pay all the payment to the ledger. The good thing about blockchain is it itself is actually it's a cryptographic currency, right? I mean that you can also use this one to pay all your payment between your user and the energy storage. But the thing is that because we're using the privacy-preserving blockchain, that means that all the payment been done by encrypted value. So all the user at this time is a little bit tricky. They need to show that all payment is consistent. That means that all the payments sum up together will equal to the operating cost at your energy storage. And at the same time, no user will know what other users are paying to the energy storage. So that is the idea for the privacy-preserving part as well. But this actually also can be done by our secure multi-party computations. So once you've done all this, then you upload this, you transfer the money in a privacy-preserving manner to your blockchain, and also upload the zero-knowledge proof, and everything is checked by the smart contract. Make sure that it has been paid consistently, and it also can cover your cost for your energy storage service. And after this, I mean, the energy storage service provider will able to get the money from blockchain. They can start executing the schedule. They also receive the schedule from the blockchain. And also for help for the later virtual net metering, they will also submit the zero-knowledge proof for all the receive from the energy storage operator. And once you have all the payment been done, all the schedule been computed in privacy-preserving manner, then the user just go on if they are doing the energy consumption normally without considering the energy storage, because they just ask all the request demand as they in their scheduling scheme, and we know that some part of the demand will come from the energy storage operator later on. But this can be done later on, can be settled by the virtual net metering, so they don't need to worry about this at this moment. So once they execute the demand, consumption, and also the battery energy storage, you execute the schedule and follow charging, discharging demand according to whatever been computed precisely. And the next step, they can just go to the grid operator to settle the virtual net metering. So as you said that the grid operator normally charge all the consumption from the user, but the user don't actually need to pay all the demand, because as you said, at the same time that some of the energy already being discharged from the energy storage operator, that means that the energy operator also exporting some energy, we get some credit. This credit also transferred to the grid operator. Eventually, this credit will be somehow refunded back to the grid to individual user, and that will settle the virtual net metering. For example, that the user will actually totally pay $5 to the grid, but later on that you will get a refund for $2 from the grid, because the $2 actually come from the exported credit from the energy operator later on, they earn later. So this can be done by the virtual net metering. But however, the thing is that how do I know that this user actually claiming what it actually deserves? So can I ensure that there's some auditing going on here? Yes, because what you already done before is using the privacy preserving blockchain. You put the zero knowledge proof there, and this zero knowledge proof can show, and the user need to prove that the refund request to the grid operator will match exactly the zero knowledge proof received on the blockchain. If it doesn't match, and then the grid operator will not refund the user. You only match according to the receipt, according to the receipt on the blockchain. And also, this part had actually been computed by the secure multi-party computation with speed, ensure that nobody can cheat. That means that this is completely reliable information. So then everything is settled, and we have to finish all the process, and then from the computation to scheduling, and all the way to virtual net metering been done in a very high level. But I would like to I don't think we have too much time to go to all the technical details, so that's why I want to also skip a whole bunch very technical thing. I just mentioned all of them here. First, you can ask, well, is it easy to schedule something without knowing individual user? The answer is we had to add a theorem to show that there's a way that you can possibly schedule a user individual with respect to a user individual demand optimally without knowing individual user optimum demand. And the detail can prove in the theorem 1. I'm not going to give you more detail, but by using a theorem, we're able to do the scheduling with respect to accurate demand, at the same time ensure that the schedule is optimum with respect to individual users as well. And the second challenge is how do we share the cost among all the user fairly? So as you can see that there's a lot of discharging and charging decision cost going involved on the battery operator. How do I attribute each of the cost individual user correctly? So there should be some kind of cost sharing mechanism. So I'm not going into too much detail about the cost sharing mechanism, but I just described some of them already given in a paper. But the good thing is that all these mechanisms ensure individual rationality with good property, and they can incorporate our system, ensure that a fair share among all the users. Last thing is the most important is how do I ensure everything is secure against any attack from, for example, unwanted information leakage or dishonest user, and that has already been proven by our other theorem 4 in the paper. I'm not going into too much detail. And very last, I just highlight the implementation. We use Ethereum in Solidity to implement a smart contract. Actually, I'm going to share the code online with you. Then you keep left. And if any user interest in our project, feel free to download the code and try our smart contract as well. And at last, I'm not going to do too much detail because I know I'm running time. So the evaluation result, including measuring the computation capacity, commission complexity, and also the gas score, etc. We also already been document our paper. So I'm just happy to report that so far the gas score seems to be moderate. I think it should be also called practical as well. So I know the chair already remind me I'm running out of time. So it's a good thing that this is the last slide. So I just summarize my contribution. So we introduced the privacy preserving and storage sharing, and we develop a blockchain solution in implement as well. And all our blockchain implementation also be open source as well. And you feel free to check out our system online as well. If you have any question you want to ask me, maybe after this conference, and you can also feel free to email me in this email address. I'm very happy to take on any questions here.
Thank you, Sid, for the excellent talk. We already have 2 people who want to ask questions. So, Sebastian, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you. I think actually Julian was first, but I can go ahead. First, thank you, Sid, for the very nice presentation. I have a question. Maybe I missed it, but how do you account for self-discharge or of the storage or the transmission losses? I mean, depending on the different location of the users, you might see you might need additional power to discharge from the storage system to actually meet the demand, or you actually have to compensate for some losses depending if a user is farther away from the battery. Is that part of the system or the approach?
I think I can incorporate the surface charge in a lump sum charge. For example, every user need to pay some lump sum cost. But I think at this moment, I haven't considered how to incorporate the user-dependent surface charge, because doing that, if that would mess up the scheduling process, that might actually review who actually requests how much demand. That will be a problem. So I think it's a good question. I may try to think about that in future work. But I want to say that in our scheduling scheme, we also incorporate any service charge like the service energy storage operator cost in a flat rate, but not a user dependence rate.
One thing, it might be incorporated with the virtual net metering that you introduced.
Yeah.
That was one idea when this question came to me. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Julia, do you want to go next?
Yes, and I want to ask, why do you use a blockchain in the first place? It creates more problems than it solves. First, the blockchain computation needs more energy than any gain from the battery system gives you. Second, the privacy issues are because the Ethereum blockchain is public. So if you don't use a blockchain, you won't have the privacy issues. You can just use a local server. And third, the blockchain doesn't help you with fraud from manipulating the energy meters. They need to be trusted anyway. So the system seems kind of pointless to me.
Okay, so let me address your question, because I think you may have a lot of questions. So first, it's a good question to ask why bother blockchain? I mean, there are different reasons. The first reason, actually, they already involve a bunch of payment. So that means that the user already pay the operator to something, right? So you need some way that actually is a privacy preserving payment. So blockchain is actually good for doing privacy preserving blockchain payment, because we know that there's some good, what they're actually using the privacy preserving way to pay the blockchain. That means that when the user when the operator receive the payment from the user, it doesn't know who pay how much. This is something important. You cannot do it with traditional banking system, because when you see a banking bill, at least that either the bank know that who pay which how much amount of money to the operator, or the operator also already know how much user already pay. If you use this without the privacy preserving blockchain, you defeat the purpose of using privacy preserving operation as well. And also you asked me, so why do we need to put all the data on the blockchain? Why don't we just put locally, maybe in some kind of database, something like that? So the next question when they ask, who actually own that shared database? Is this some kind of operator share owning that database? I mean that this operator owning that database may also possibly lead some information from you as well. So that means that even though you use a distributed database, you also need to ensure privacy and security as well. Also, that if your database owned by one some other cloud computer operator, and then this cloud computer operator somehow disappear, for example, I don't know, and then you hold all your private data in the database. The good thing about blockchain is actually it's a complete decentralized system. That means that nobody can take down your data anytime. So that means that your system should not be able to disrupt by any operator third party. It's completely open and free. So of course, of doing that, I mean that you need to open all the things to transparent to a blockchain. That's why you need an extra layer to protect your public data, your private data stored on the public blockchain. That's why we need doing this. Do you think that makes sense to use blockchain?
No, it still doesn't make sense to me, because when the server goes down, when you have problems, the server's going down, you could also have problems that are
but servers going down is different, right?
Energy.
So you have a blockchain, that means that it's actually owned by a whole bunch of miners. It's not by one single operator. So far, nobody want to take down maybe Bitcoin, because a lot of people actually put a lot of money in Bitcoin. That's why they keep the service keep running all the time. And that's why I think it's much more reliable to rely on one single operator. And also, I think you mentioned one important thing about the energy consumption about blockchain. I'm not disagree with you, but the thing is that there are a lot of good technology for blockchain so far, actually improve a lot of the energy efficiency of blockchain. For example, you don't need to use proof of work. You might need to use a proof of stake. Actually, it's much more energy efficient than proof of work. And I foresee that in the future that we have much more energy efficient blockchain. At the same time, this blockchain is completely decentralized, not going to own by any party. It's also good to ensure the reliability, and also nobody actually can own your data. You own your data because data is actually put in blockchain. It's not owned by any bank, not owned by any government, not owned by any entity. It's owned by everybody. Okay.
Okay. So we can agree that we disagree. I don't.
Yeah, but I'm very happy to discuss with you maybe offline. It's
yes,
okay.
I think it'll be good to carry over this discussion on Slack, Julien. Please use the session 1 Slack channel, and Sid, you can also answer the questions there. Yes, please use the Slack channel. Okay, yeah. So let's move on to the, thanks for a very, very good talk, Sid. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on.